Welcome everyone, my name is Martin Ramirez. I am the co-founder and CEO of Signify. We build AI agents for product compliance, and I'm here with our head of customer success, Christina Klopsides. Let's jump in right into a little bit more of what we have for all of you today. We're dividing the conversation into two main sections. I will be talking a little bit more about what is an AI agent, how it is being used pragmatically, why you should not be afraid of them. And Christina is going to contextualize the technology and the capabilities of what we've built on how our customers are using this in production today. This is not an idea, this is not a concept, this is not another AI sci-fi claim of the future. These are technologies that are being implemented and used for product compliance today. Just to give you a little bit more context about Signify, we are a spin-off company from the Paul Allen AI Institute Incubator in Seattle. We spent over 6 to 8 months back in 2023 and 2024 doing research, building our own AI models, and understanding the nuance of product compliance through the systems that we ended up building and taking to production in spring 2024. When we take a look about why right now it is so important to start thinking about a different approach to the craft, it all comes down to how much we're drowning in work that is coming from every business function that produces a work output throughout the entire product life cycle. We know that our products, particularly in food and bev, are regulated by the 21 CFR, the FDA through warning letters, guidances, signals to the market their latest interpretation and enforcement out of the CFR. So how are we keeping up with the latest permutation of the interpretation of those requirements? How do we address the work that needs to be validated when we're given more work, less resources? That's where AI agents become a member of your organization that can help you tackle that amount of work that needs to be performed accurately in order to safeguard the quality and safety of the products that we're taking to market. Something that's very important to contextualize about the technologies that we're working with is we're looking at a fundamental shift in how software becomes one of the most important tools in your day-to-day. When you think about systems of records from your ERP, your EQMS, your PLM and the like, those are fantastic pieces of software that helps you organize the work, provide oversight, and ensure that the progression of a work unit happens as those SOPs were designed for that execution to take place. The main fundamental change when we think about agents, this is not about overseeing the work. This is software that is capable of performing an instruction or a task on your behalf and producing an outcome that then you can run with in a very similar fashion than you will do with a coworker. We're collaborating, we divide and conquer, I finish my unit of work, pass it back to you, we continue the conversation, work is being done. That is the main fundamental difference. Again, it is not about overseeing a workflow. It is not about adding another process that has been policed by software. It is software doing a work unit on your behalf with a high degree of precision, so then you can deploy your own time and your organization's time in higher value activities and more strategic engagements rather than doing the mechanical work. In the context of Signify, and I'll give you guys a little bit of inside baseball, it begins with the value pair of product X distributed in market Y. Christina and I have a food beverage that we are taking to market in the US. We give that context to the agent, and we ask the agent the first question. From formulation to shelf, what are the regulatory and compliance and safety requirements that I need to vet this product so I can take it to market? The agent goes ahead, takes in the entire 21 CFR, which by the way is over 5 million words. I don't know if anyone really enjoys reading it. It also takes in the context of the latest from the FDA and contextualizes the entire corpus of the regulation to answer that very question. From formulation to shelf, what are the requirements that we need to meet in order to take the product to market? That is job number one. After you all, as a subject matter expert, validates the output of the agent, now you can give it another instruction. A very common instruction that we give, and Christina, if we can go to the next slide,
of course,
is starting with the artwork validation. The artwork or labeling validation is a very intriguing use case. We know any claims that we put on that label we know the formulation or ingredient list of that product impacts what actually makes it to the surface. So we answer what we need to know, what we need to apply from formulation to shelf. Now we have a checklist, we have a compliance framework that manually, again, all of you probably have done a permutation of this task, where you take in the checklist that you have to validate the label against, you fire up Excel, now you're building a requirements traceability matrix on your own, your browser probably has at least 25 tabs open where you're going and validating against the label what you're looking at the regulation. That is the task that we then assign to the agent. But then the agent says, well, there is an allergen claim at the label. For me to be able to ascertain that you can make that claim, I need to see evidence. So show me your sourcing, your supplier evidences, the formulation of your product, your ingredients declaration, any third-party lab test that you can use in the case you get audited, in the case your product actually has some contaminants. The agent can now parse through the entire GMP documentation to perform the validation of such claims on your label. So it's not only about the placement of certain components, it is about the substantiation of every one of those claims. Next one, please. One of the questions that we get quite often, and taking into account we're the technologists, we are the AI nerds in the room, we're here to service you all as we bring these products to market from a food and bev point of view. There is this ongoing conversation around, well, AI is the future. We tried AI, ChatGPT was cool, but it never answers my questions. I fundamentally disagree with the entire conversational experience. I think it's a horrible approach from my industry to yours, where now we put the burden on the user to know how to prompt these systems. They're very powerful systems. The agent is doing that for you. What we're seeing is the early adoption of these capabilities and technologies is happening faster than ever before. Our ability to be able to keep up with the regulatory changes, not only here in the US, remember that value pair that I mentioned earlier, product X in market Y? Are we going to redo the entire work that we've been talking about when we take the same product to the EU? When we take the same product to LATAM, to Canada? That is absurd. And the money is showing evidences that companies are now heavily invested in bringing in these capabilities into their own processes. The last thing that I will say before I pass it to Christina to get a real life example of all these esoteric concepts that I brought up, we should not be afraid of AI at all. This is another member of your organization that can be delegated and trusted to do the mechanical work. Some of our customers even call it the pre-work. Before I deploy my subject matter expertise, I need to run a gap analysis to know what requires remediation. We can do the gap analysis with agents, and then you all with your subject matter expertise and know-how can deploy what needs to be remediated, can fix those particular gaps to ensure the product is indeed ready for the market and most importantly for the people that are going to consume those products. So let's bring all of that into reality. I'll pass it to Christina and she will give a deep dive into an example of how this works.
Yeah, how many of you do actual regulatory work in this room? So how many of you are doing conformity assessments as part of your daily job in quality or safety, right? So I also have built my career in regulatory and compliance, so I understand how these regulations start to create complexity in your business operations, right? So let's talk regulatory changes. While the regulation might not change that often, the way the FDA or other governing body looks at that regulation might change. So guidances come out, recalls happen, the way that we're interpreting that language and the way that we are operating, that could change. You then need to take those changes and do an impact assessment against your products, against your market, and figure out, how does this change impact me? What if you're changing your product formulation? How does that change how I comply with the regulations, right? And generally, if you're on a compliance team, you're probably part of a fragmented system, right? So generally, compliance teams are fragmented, they're breaking up, you're sending spreadsheets to each other, you're slacking each other or teams messaging each other about something that's changed, right? And lastly, you're usually the last line of defense, and there's a need for speed when you want to bring a product to market. So we know that all those complexities exist. The last piece of this is, most of those things I talked about are happening manually. I think Martine mentioned earlier the tabs that are open or the multiple spreadsheets and documents that you're going through and referencing, right? That's time consuming, it's error prone, and it's expensive. And you need to be able to be deployed on more high value activities, things like dealing with audits, dealing with regulators, right? And that's where Signify AI agents can come in. Let's talk about a label, right? So this is what consumers see. Consumers are making decisions about products every day based on labels, and it's not just a regulatory requirement, it's how you're communicating with your consumers, what's in your product, the nutrition facts, right? Your ingredients, allergens, those things are important when it comes to recalls, manufacturing information, and of course, your UPC, your barcodes, right? But again, this label review, this label is usually happening manually by a person behind the scenes doing multiple rounds of reviews before you can even bring a product to market. We know that there's the label, but that's just kind of the first layer of compliance. It's kind of the first line here. There's more to just the label. We know to get to the label, you have to do claim substantiation. You're also reviewing your formulation documents, right? You're looking at your claims, you're seeing how that ties in and if your label matches with that. You're going through your ingredients declaration. That's all represented on your label. You're making sure that your ingredients are safe, that your consumers know what they need to know about your ingredients. And last, supplier validation. That's all part of the process too. Who you're buying from, where you bought something from, all of that information matters when it comes to validating a product label. And we know as regulatory professionals, the path to validating compliance through an organization is usually a single person or a single group that's responsible for making all of these checks, right? And that can be really troublesome. It can take a lot of time. It can really slow things down when it comes to your business operation. So AI agents can bring that first pass competency in. So instead of a person manually reviewing a label, you can have an agent do that first pass review for you and tell you exactly where you need to focus your compliance review. So instead of having to go through hundreds of requirements, perhaps you're looking at 10 or 20, and you can go through and see the explanation as to why something is or isn't compliant. And I think we actually want to show you Signify in action. So bear with me here. But I'm going to pull up a couple examples of assessments that we've done. Now, this is how Signify looks, right? And what this is the result of is Signify has product context. What is my product? What market am I selling in? The first thing the agent does is identify the requirements that are applicable to my product. The second thing that the agent does is it actually looks at the product label or document, we have an example of that too, and tells you where you are or aren't compliant. Now, this is an example of a consumer product, right, off the shelf, a bar. And you can see here that it did pretty well. We've got a lot of greens. Here's another example, food safety plan, right? So you can see exactly where the agent's looking. So again, same situation. The agent was able to identify the requirements that apply to a food safety plan, pull them, and then actually look within the document to find where something is or isn't compliant. You might notice here that the citation isn't listed. If you're missing a requirement or something isn't in your document, there's nothing for the agent to point to for you to go look at, but you do have this explanation here so you can see exactly what you need to add or change about something that you've got.
And Christina, if I can add,
Please do. Yeah.
There are two very interesting and valuable components that is happening. One, in this case, as we're evaluating a document, as Christina mentioned, the agent is building the citations, pinpointing exactly at the source of evidence used to make the compliance determination. In the case of the label, it is automatically doing the annotations on the label, and our customers use this, and we have an audit trail of every permutation that has been performed as part of the evidences they will submit to the regulators of the evaluation that has happened against either one of those asset types. The other thing that's very important to underline, in the artwork validation use case, and this is in reference to one of our enterprise customers, they go through around 10 cycles of revisions before getting to the final cut. And that's between legal, between the marketing team, between the design team, and the global regulatory affairs organization. Their fully burdened cost per revision is around $120, and it takes them around an hour to perform one cycle. Signify does artwork validation in under 60 seconds, and the burden to the operation is under $20. So the operating gains, that 300% of efficiency gain is very palpable. Not only we're reducing the number of cycles, it is operationally more efficient without degrading the quality of the evaluations. It is very straightforward from our perspective. Anytime you have a new product being developed that is going to market, in your pre-market compliance validations, bringing in your entire GMP documentation stack, given the age and the context of the markets in which you're intended to distribute that product, that sets the stage for the evaluations to be performed accurately. Whenever we picked up a signal from the regulatory landscape, we retrain our models. So the models, and this is something that's very important, the AI, the Signify AI, gets smarter about the regulatory landscape. We are not trading with customer data at all. Your information is being used to perform the evaluations. It is encrypted. The customer can request to download the data at any given point in time. The only way the Signify AI gets quote unquote smarter is by understanding the latest interpretation of the regulatory corpus for a given product category in a given market.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's important to add too is it's not just regulatory bodies that we're dealing with. We've had people come to us with other sets of standards. So think if you're trying to sell within a marketplace like an Amazon or a Whole Foods or something like that, right? We can also turn our agents and train them on those requirements to set up that set of requirements that you need to comply with, and then check your documentation or your label or whatever it is against those requirements. So we're trying to unlock market opportunities that way as well.
If I can do a quick survey by hand, how many of us in the room currently use AI on your daily work in any capacity?
That's
And
really
how
good
many
to
of
see.
those of you are using AI that is not Copilot or ChatGPT? It's a greenfield opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is pretty much it. I don't know if
Yeah.
you have time for questions or if anyone has any questions. Our booth is actually right across the street, 712, and we're happy to go a little bit deeper and show you more on how this could be of value to you all.
Absolutely.
Enjoy the conference, and thank you for giving us the time to show you what we built.
Thank you.